Hi, Denise Naylor here and welcome to News Views on Friday, 9th of February 2018. An opportunity to reflect on this week's developments in the financial arena. And obviously the big news story is still Carillion, and I want to use that company as an example to discuss one of the questions that my students very often ask me, and that is, what's the difference between an executive director and a non-executive director? And that's a very good question. And we have an opportunity this week when some of the directors or former directors of Carillion Public Limited Company appeared in front of the members of Parliament to really get a little bit of an insight into that distinction. So first of all, we start with definition, as always. And for definitions, I'm going to the Institute of Directors, iod.com, www.iod.com, where they say, and I quote, essentially, the non-executive director's role is to provide a creative contribution to the board by providing independent oversight and constructive challenge to the executive directors. They also point out there's no legal distinction between executive and non-executive directors. So if you are a director of a company, you are a director of the company, and you have full responsibility for the company's acts and omissions. It follows, says the IOD, that non-executive directors, often known as NEDs, NED, are subject to the codified duties of directors contained in the Companies Act 2006 in the same way as executive directors. All right, that's clear, I think. But what does it mean? Well, let's go back. Independent oversight. Now, would you agree with me that for somebody to be independent, they need their own point of view as a minimum? They also need to be in a position that they can't be corrupted by the company. So they need to be paid, or they need to have private independent wealth so that they can speak truth to the executive directors. The executive directors are the day-to-day full-time directors of the company. And constructive challenge. So in other words, they need to challenge constructively, not negatively, but they need to challenge. So if the executive directors say, we're going to do something, the non-executive directors, at a minimum, I would say, should be asking, well, can we see the plans? Can we see the financial projections? Can we see how this fits in with the company's strategy? Can we see a lot of detail about this project before we agree to it? Now, if we look at Carillion PLC, it's quite interesting. Remember what a large company this was and is to some extent. It's in liquidation. It's still trading partially. There were 7 directors, according to Companies House, www.companieshouse.gov.uk. 7. That's not very many, is it? And of those 7, 3 are qualified accountants. Now, I don't like to say anything bad about my own profession, but I'll just let that rest. 3 out of 7 qualified accountants. So people who should know what they're doing. And more to the point, in 2017, last year, there were 2 resignations from the board of directors of finance directors. So they lost 2 finance directors in the last year. Something was happening. And when the MPs, members of Parliament, queried this week with the people who came before them, the Financial Times reports on the 6th of February, www.ft.com, that Keith Cochrane, who is one of the accountant members of the board, when he was quizzed by MPs, admitted that the board should have asked, quote, more probing questions. So you see, they knew what they should be doing. They knew what independence means because it's in the corporate code. I talked about that before. And he says we should have asked more probing questions. So it's going to be very interesting. It's a very sad story. Many people have lost their jobs, pensioners potentially suffering, contractors, as I talked about last week. And the directors, it's a difficult task. I'm not suggesting it is easy, but I think it is time for a bit of a reflection on what are the responsibilities of directors and how they can be more, to quote the IOD, have more independent oversight and constructive challenge. So I leave you with that thought for this week. A little bit somber, but many of you watching this are ambitious and in your careers you are interested in becoming a director. So I would urge you to give some thought to those responsibilities and what being a director of a company really means. Thank you for joining me. Remember, always go back to original sources and do join me again.